Welcome back, everyone. As you probably guessed from the title and the thumbnail today, we're going to talk about California's Glock ban. And honestly, it's a lot more expansive than that. Right now, it's just California, but unfortunately, it very likely will not be California going forward. And we'll explain all that as we go along. So as of when I'm recording this, this past Friday, Governor Gavin Newsom, who on every national show he's ever on claims he's not anti-gun, he signed 3 anti-gun pieces of legislation in California into law. Did it on a Friday evening, hoping that probably it wouldn't get a whole lot of attention. Well, we're going to give it some attention here today. And the big one, of course, that everyone's talking about is the Glock ban, which is important. However, there's some nuance to that, and then there's 2 other laws that we also need to cover. So I suppose let's get into that. I made some notes here to kind of keep everything clicking along. So the big one that everybody's talking about is AB 1277. If I think about it, if I remember, I will link to all these bills down below so you guys can read them. But this one here is pretty straightforward. Basically, what it says is that it bans the sale of Glocks and Glock clones now in the state of California. And it goes into effect on January 1st, 2026. So if you are in California and you want any of these types of guns, I would get one right now because I would imagine the wait is going to be long for ones that are on the roster, as well as the processing time for them very likely will be long as well, getting into the state and then going through your weirdo background check that you guys have in California, which costs money, which is crazy as well. So if you are looking for a Glock or a Glock clone that is on the roster, I probably would get one now. So basically what it does is it talks about cruciform triggers. So what it says here is the sale of any semi-automatic pistol with a cruciform trigger bar with the capability to take a backplate. So basically what they're going for there, what they're claiming is the proliferation rather of Glock switches is like a danger or something like that, or unusually dangerous. So a few things to talk about there. That cruciform trigger is in a few different guns that are on the California roster that have been identified by this piece of legislation. So of course, all Glocks, every single Glock ever made has a cruciform trigger bar. And then guns that are on the roster, Shadow Systems, a number of their guns, and then the Daria guns, the DY9s, which I recently reviewed, which YouTube has completely demonetized. So if you guys are interested in Daria, check it out on Rumble or my X. But anyway, so those are the ones that are on the roster that have been identified. However, I think the slippery slope here is going to be that cruciform trigger bar wording. So while guns like for example, an M&P don't take a cruciform trigger bar, or like a Smith & Wesson SD9 VE, they don't take technically a cruciform trigger bar. The same type of backplates, which I'm not going to get into on YouTube because I'll be accused of teaching people how to make machine guns or something like that. But those 2 guns, for example, are perfect examples of guns that can also have the same type of conversion done to them. And so basically anything that has a traditional Glock style striker safety, again, I'm not going to explain how, but I can assure you anything that has a traditional Glock style striker safety can be converted to a full auto gun in the exact same way that Glocks can, even without a cruciform trigger bar. So how they're going to define that and interpret that in California is going to be a very big thing going forward, in my opinion. So a good example of a gun that doesn't have that, for example, would be like the HK VP9s. Those have a totally different type of striker assembly, and the conversion of them is a little bit more complicated if you actually wanted to do it. So right now, again, we're just talking about on the roster guns, which is all the Glocks. Again, the Shadow Systems and the Daria guns, there may be more than that, but those are the ones that I am aware of. Because if you don't live in California, you may not know California has a roster of guns that are approved for sale in the state, which is crazy. But there is that. Additionally, I should note, I haven't heard any statements from Glock yet. However, the folks over at Shadow Systems, as well as the folks over at Daria, have stated that they have a workaround for this. Now, speaking about workarounds, if you will, is that in the legislation itself, it says that if the cruciform is removed, but the gun is already on the roster, so i.e. some other trigger mechanism is used in the guns for California, then it doesn't have to go through all the California testing to get back on the roster. So that is, I guess, a ray of sunlight for the folks in California. So if a company changes their cruciform trigger bar to a different trigger mechanism, which of course there's a ton of ways to make striker fire guns work, then California is saying, as of this piece of legislation, it could change tomorrow, that those guns could get right back in and still be on the roster without the cruciform trigger bar. So I thought that was important to make a note of. So that is the California ban. Again, it goes into place in just a few months, starts on January 1st, 2026. From what I've read anyway, It doesn't impact law enforcement sales. And typically I bring that up in a very different way than I would bring it up in California. So for those who don't know, in California, one of the ways a lot of people get normal guns into the state is that law enforcement officers buy them and then they decide they don't want them anymore and they sell them to non-law enforcement officers. That is, or has been, I should say, legal in California over the years. From what I read in this bill, I don't see any change to that. So, if you want a regular Glock, say like in 6 or 7 years, and a law enforcement officer buys it, as of right now anyway, they'll still be able to sell it to you. Of course, the price will be exorbitant. It'll be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, something like that. So, continuing on. The next piece of legislation that Governor Newsom signed into law is SB 704. This one impacts barrels. So what this does is it kind of mirrors a lot of European barrel importation laws, which is horrible. Obviously, a lot of countries in Europe treat barrels as if they are a firearm, which is why if you get like a Walther, an HK, a Steyr, those guns, they all have the serial numbers on the barrel. That is a reason for that, for those who don't know. Basically what California is doing here is trying to do the exact same thing. So what it does here is it makes barrels for firearms unable to be sent to your home. They must go to an FFL, and then at that FFL, in order to transfer the barrel, again, just a barrel, to you, they have to do a background check. And as I mentioned earlier, California has background check fees. So the price of barrels are going to go up. And then of course, there has to be some sort of mechanism to track them. And I would imagine they're also going to put some sort of serial number requirement onto barrels. I actually looked in the bill. It's vague on that. It mentions it, but it doesn't like hammer it home. But I would imagine they would have to, otherwise there's no other enforcement mechanism that they can actually do that. However, again, I went through the piece of legislation. I see no prohibition, unless it's somewhere else in California law that I'm unaware of. I see no prohibition on going to another state, buying a barrel, and then bringing it into California. Of course, if you did that, this law would still prohibit you from selling it without the FFL. However, if you live in California and, for example, you wanted to take a trip to Vegas and get a bunch of standard capacity magazines, a bunch of barrels, all those sorts of things, you could do so and bring them into the state. The magazines, California law says you can't do that. However, the barrel, from what I'm reading here, just in this one specific bill, 702, there's no prohibition that I have seen on it. But just know that if you want to buy a barrel, I probably would get it now unless you plan on traveling out of state. And this one doesn't go into effect until July 1st of 2027. So you do have some time on that. And of course, basically, as soon as these things go into effect, there's going to be the lawsuit printer firing up, and there's going to be 1 million lawsuits against all of these pieces of legislation because, of course, they are all unconstitutional and all fail the Bruin test, which is the current test as to whether anything is compliant with the Second Amendment in America. However, as we all know, those cases take years to go through. So I wouldn't really count on it, at least as of right now, and who knows what's going to happen after 2028. So I personally would get whatever I wanted now that you can get in California. That is my piece of advice to you. And then the last piece of legislation is going to be AB 1078. Additionally, I should also note there's no sponsor for today's video. So make sure you guys are getting signed up for my email list as well as sign up for my SMS list. You can text GEAR to the code here on your screen and get signed up for the SMS list for great deals. There's going to be an exclusive one that's going to be coming out in a day or two for people who are only on the SMS and email list. Stay tuned for that. You guys will see it. But AB 1078 limits you to purchasing 3 guns per month. So many of you guys may remember, for years, California had a law on the books that would limit you to purchasing 1 gun a month. Of course, that went all the way up through the courts and was thrown out by the Supreme Court once again because of the Bruin test and several others. Actually, they actually had several other pieces of legislation, or rather Supreme Court precedent, I should say, that impacted that case. But of course, that case is completely unconstitutional. Nowhere in the Second Amendment does it say you can only buy 1 gun per month. That is insane. So it was thrown out. But of course, California doesn't want to comply with the intent of the Supreme Court. They just want to comply with the letter of the law, if you will. So they just changed it to 3 guns now. And now you can only buy 3 guns a month instead of 1, as if that somehow makes it compliant with the Second Amendment. Can't make this stuff up. Anyway, that is what it does. Additionally, one thing it does that I was expecting, and based on what New York did in 2025, earlier 2025, it did this. It copied a lot of what New York did. It essentially increased the sensitive places or prohibited places under concealed carry laws. So for folks who don't know, California has been getting their nuts stomped on by the Department of Justice in terms of concealed carry laws, which I will give them credit when they do the right thing. The Department of Justice in this case has been stomping California's nuts in terms of concealed carry permits being issued, as well as places where they can be used. And so this piece of legislation fights back against that because they don't like being told to do the right thing. And so what they did with AB 1078 is they prevented concealed carrying on public transportation, any type of public transportation, even if you have a concealed carry permit in California, which again, every day that goes by, there's more and more people that are getting them in California, which is really, really good. Many of you guys may remember just a couple years ago, the wait for a concealed carry permit could be like 2 to 8 years, depending on the county you lived in California. That is not the case anymore. You absolutely can get them if you are a law-abiding citizen in California. However, one thing it also does that is kind of a good thing, but again, this is a reaction to the Department of Justice stomping the nuts. This is not something they wanted to do. But what it does do is it puts into place a system that allows for out-of-state residents to be able to carry firearms in California if they have an out-of-state concealed carry permit. There's going to be a system. I don't know what it is. If you actually read the legislation, again, it's kind of vague. So very likely they're just going to leave it up to administrators in the state of California to create the system. But it does mandate that a system be created, which allows out-of-state residents to be able to carry their firearms in California if they are visiting. So that is the one, I guess, good thing, but they only did that because they had to do it because the Department of Justice made them do it. So there is that. That is what is going on with California. Like I mentioned earlier, the big one on the Glock ban is that there are companies that are going to be affected by it that say they're going to change their mechanisms to be compliant with California. However, I really think that that's counting on people in California, the legislators, doing the right thing and actually following the law that they passed. I'm not sure that's going to happen because of what I mentioned earlier. Again, if you have that traditional striker safety, these things can be modified, let's just say, to do the things that the folks in California don't want. So there is that. With that, I think that's all I have for you. If you guys have any questions about this or anything else that we discuss here on the channel, you can always post those down below in the comments section. As always, you can also post those over at my various social media sites. The non-meta ones are the best place to post them because that's where I'm the most active, because that's where I am the least censored. So I definitely recommend you guys follow me over there, particularly X, Truth, Parler, all of those ones. I'm able to say things that the folks on Meta would crush me for. So there is that. Additionally, if you like this video, type of information we're bringing you here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, both on YouTube as well as Rumble. Huge community growing over on Rumble every day. We absolutely appreciate that. It's actually growing faster than YouTube, shocker. So regardless, I don't care where you guys watch me, as long as you watch me. That is what I want here on the channel. I want you guys to get the information and be well-informed citizens. So there is that. You guys have hit the subscribe button on both though, and you're not seeing 2 to 4 videos a week here on the channel. Easy way to get around that censorship is to sign up for my email at the website here on your screen. This email goes out in 2 different phases. So it's basically 2 different email lists. One of them goes out once a month, so just 1 email a month, and it has all the videos since the previous month's email went out. So that way there's no big tech giant censoring your eyes from my content. And of course, we have the daily deals email that many of you guys love. So if things like firearms, optics, suppressors, vertical foregrips, lights, ammunition, magazines, if those things go on sale, it will be in the daily deals email. It goes out pretty much every day, as the name indicates, and it typically has 8 to 10 of the best deals that we find around the internet. If the item, whatever it is, whether it be magazine, ammunition, optics, etc., if the item, whatever it is in the email on a given day, it's the cheapest I know of for that item on that day because I have done the price comparisons for you. So that way, hopefully, it saves you guys some time as well as some money. And there's also a good meme in there that a lot of folks like. So if you just want Pro 2A memes, I'm your man. Sign up for the email and you will get them. Lastly, like we mentioned, we also have an SMS service. If you guys are watching this, you can send text the word gear to the code here on your screen. That will get you signed up. You can also, if you don't want to do that, you can go over to the computer, go to the website here on your screen and manually sign up for it. Either way, that will get you signed up. That goes out at most once a day. Either has a really good deal that just dropped that very likely will sell out, or it has a new video that just dropped. Once again, getting around the algorithmic censorship that we deal with here on the internet. That is all I have for you. The last thing I wanted to say that I intimated in the beginning of the video is that right now this is California. But as we all know, there are several other states that have pending legislation very similar to this. New York, Washington State, Illinois, they all have legislation in the pipeline to do essentially the exact same thing with Glocks and Glock clones. That list of states that is trying to do these unconstitutional acts basically expands every month. So if you think that you are safe where you live, there is a gigantic percentage of this population of this country that is not safe from these types of legislation. So definitely get active, even if you are not in California, because these things are coming for you. There are communists everywhere that want to do this regardless of where you live. So stay active, stay vigilant, and get ready. That's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.